What's going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadskii, back again, here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video, and today we're back with another Grand Party video, and of course, day 2 is upon us, and of course, I wanted to try Gear 5 again, because he's just so much fun, and I know you guys love seeing the Gear 5 content, obviously because it's such a big release right now. So let's go ahead and break down what we have here in store here. The first game you're seeing here in match 1, we've got our typical Dex versus Quick. For those of you who don't know, I didn't even mention it yesterday, I did do the discount multi on the Kawamatsu Rumble Sugo Fest, and I was lucky enough to actually pull Pell, which is one of the highest tier Rumble units you can get, one of the ones I was missing for so long. I think he's been out for like well over a year at this point, maybe even 1.5 years or something. I didn't have him, so I was really happy to get my hands on him and finally make the Dex team a bit more powerful, and he definitely makes a big difference. You know, beforehand I was using Dalton, and Dalton still is a really good Rumble unit, and he's still on my bench, but Pell is definitely a better unit. He's more self-sufficient. You can kind of put Pell on like any team, he performs really well. So shout out to Pell for the one time, and he actually does use his GP burst skill against us, and at this point, because I felt really comfortable that we were going to secure the victory, I felt like it wasn't really a good idea to use our burst skill. I actually hold it back until the very end, basically. You know, there's no real reason to use it here. I felt really comfortable, just going to skip, and we get a clean 8-0 victory versus Quick with Dex, which happens quite a lot, actually. Move on to the second game, though, and we're using our Free Spirit team versus Sai. I did show off this team yesterday, and it is annoying using Odin and Toki. Like, if I was able to make, you know, my own personal team for this, I would prefer to use V2 Odin instead of Odin and Toki due to investments on the character. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do because, you know, V2 Odin works so well aside Gear 5 Luffy, of course, on the Sai team. So, you know, we're using this team here, and this team's still very good. A lot of people are still opting to use V2 Rayleigh. I think V2 Rayleigh is still a very good unit. You see the opposing unit, the opposing burst comes in with Roger, and he's got no more burst left, so I felt pretty comfortable in using our Luffy burst and removing the halving of stats, which is one of the big annoyances, you know, when you go up against opposing Rogers. And the damage through defense, people are starting to realize how good the Luffy burst skill is. I know a lot of people are switching up their leaders to Luffy now. It's going to be very annoying to take down and go up against, but man, it's such a good effect. But actually you see here that it's a really close game, and at this point here, I was just kind of hoping, like, am I able to survive? I can use my Luffy and Yamato skill again, we basically win, and that's exactly what happened. Luffy Yamato picked up quite a few knockouts there, and were able to secure a victory, even though it was looking a little dicey, but I felt pretty comfortable that even if it did come down to the third game, they would be able to get the job done with a Sai team versus the opposing Dex team, especially if we had a second burst skill. But now we can go ahead and move on now to the second game, and we've got the first one coming up, which is going to be that same Free Spirit team versus an opposing Dex team. If you guys watched the first day of Grand Party, I actually used this Dex team versus an opposing, or I used the Free Spirit team that you're seeing here versus an opposing Dex team, and we actually lost, but this team here is definitely more manageable. You know, when you see an opposing Dex team that's using Cat and Dog on the same squad, it does make it a little bit more manageable, because obviously Dog only hits quick characters. Obviously he will still hit Zoro pretty hard. Zoro has a revive though, which is kind of nice, but you know, Dog doesn't really do a whole lot, and Cat, while he is still a pretty good unit and does do pretty solid damage, he does only do horizontal damage, so it is, again, as I said, a little bit more manageable. I was a little bit concerned that he's using Rayleigh, which is going to add actually quite a lot of bulk to his team, and you know, when Dog Storm with Cat Viper and also having Rayleigh on the team, he's going to have a lot of defense. So I was a little concerned about that, and it kind of put me in a bit of situation where, you know, if Luffy Yamato doesn't launch their skill often enough, we actually might just straight up lose the game. But of course, Sanji just charging all our specials here, below 50 seconds, Luffy Yamato goes crazy, and we're just kind of hoping that we can continuously launch that skill. Now, we do have the burst skill of Gear 5 Luffy ready to go. I was waiting to see whether or not I actually needed to use it versus the opponent here. If the opponent uses that Roger burst, then that's going to be kind of interesting. I think I actually kind of screw up though, because, you know, with the way that this opponent's setup here is in this second match, the second matchup is not really favorable for us at all, as I end up using my Dex team versus the opposing Free Spirit team. And that's the thing, is like, while yes, I could have just changed up the team, I felt confident that my Free Spirit team was going to kill the opposing Dex team, which is basically what happened. We timed them out. We didn't have any knockouts, which is massive. So we won via timeout. But then we move into this second game here, and like I knew that we weren't going to be in a very good position here. the opponent is going to use their burst skill, which is going to halve our stats. And I think my ideology here is this is not going to be that big of a problem because they typically won't launch a special in the first 20 seconds. And my thinking here was I was going to use the GP burst of Gear 5 on the second Roger skill. But the issue with that is that you have to make sure that you can output 55,000 damage so that the opponent can get their burst skill back. And I was kind of hoping that we're able to do 55,000 damage, the opponent uses their burst skill, and that's going to be that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So we put ourselves in a situation where if we use the burst skill, then we're not going to have a burst skill ready to go in game 3, even though we probably could get it halfway through the match anyway. So I felt like at this point, with all these action binds happening, we got kind of unlucky. I was also thinking if I can get a Blackbeard health cut and then use the GP burst skill, that probably would win us the game, but we just couldn't get it to work. We got a little bit unlucky with binded characters and stuff like that. So move on now to the final game. The opponent doesn't have their burst skill, but they will get it eventually, and it's going to be this weird-looking strength team against us here with our Psy team, and this team goes crazy. I absolutely love using this new Psy team now with Gear 5 Luffy. I think he's a huge addition. Great rumble ability passive throughout the entire game, and then has a really powerful special too. If you get them all lined up and doing that massive 4,500 fixed damage in a huge range horizontally, and then also giving a further attack increase, and then doing damage through defense to a character with high defense, like, it's just a really good unit, man. Like, Gear 5's super solid, and you know, if you can knock out a really high defensively focused unit, it will go a long way with making the rest of your matchup a little bit easier, which is really, really good. And then move on to the final match, and the first game is going to be up where we have Dex versus Quick. You know, pretty straightforward once again. Not really too much to say about the Dex versus Quick matchups. It is kind of surreal, to be honest, because I don't know why people continuously build quick teams at this point. Like, I guess depending on your leader, you know, and depending on what you go up against. Like, if you see a full, you know, solid strength team, yeah, I can kind of understand building a quick team. But are people really encountering strength teams that often where they need to build quick teams? It's just surprising to me. I see lots of quick teams, and I love seeing them because they're just, I wouldn't say they're auto wins, but they're very favorable matchups is what I would say. Very favorable matchups for me, so I'll take it every day. I basically bank that as a free win and then try and make sure that one of my other teams can secure a win against the other two squads. Of course, that job is a little bit more difficult as you go deeper into Grand Party seasons when you cannot see the opposing team, so obviously it makes things a little bit more difficult. So no real issues with the versus quick team, and then we move on to the secondary fight of this match, which is going to be the side team with Gear 5 versus an int-driven team, and I was really excited to show this one too, because that's always been like one of the big matchups in Rumble. If you go throughout, I'd say the history of Rumble, but you know, Int versus Psy, it's always been a big matchup, and Psy had the upper hand quite early. Int came back with huge support for Int Driven, and I would say now with the latest release of Gear 5 and potentially Momo as well, I can't wait to pull Momo so that I can try out that really cool team. But I think with all of the stops right now, I think potentially Psy is back on top when you compare the matchups. But again, it is kind of depending on how things go. It is still RNG focused, and I haven't really come up against Rumble Apu and like the really big anti-Psy team that I've seen some people use with Apu, Conus Rumble Rare Recruit, Rogue, like that kind of focused int team I think would be kind of difficult to get through. But considering Gear 5 Luffy does massive fixed damage, that really helps you with outputting more damage versus those bulkier Psy hate, you know, focused teams. But that is going to wrap it up from me. I'm not too sure what I'm going to do for day 3 of Grand Party. We'll see what happens, but hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Other than that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.
心臓の音